Hey, it's Mazzy, and I'm excited to present to you my answers to the official 2025 vinyl tag. Every year there's one tag of 20 questions, 20 prompts where we all answers. Yes, there are a lot of sub-genre tags of folk and blues and jazz and bad karma and just weird ass other reasons to show records. Still fun, but this is the official one. The last few years, it was created out of Manchester, England, and now we bring it to the North American continent. And the creator is Pretty Green Vinyl Guy. His name is Edwin. I'll put a link below to his channel and all the questions. And please tag it Vinyl Tag 2025 or whatever my tag shows below. Now, Edwin put these questions together. He is from Vancouver Island in Canada, so maybe about 3 hours from me, but we've never met in person, but we have collaborated because we go back around the same time, I think, we possibly started doing these channels. So I'm going to go through all 20 of them, and I'm going to answer them to the best of my ability, my bias, and you should do the same. And this is a great way of jumping in if you're even remotely considering creating a vinyl community channel. This is a great place to start because people watch these things, or some of them. So the first one is your best purchase of 2024, new or old. I showed this after my wonderful trip to London. Portobello Road, I went there in the morning, and at a stall in front of a storefront, I got a top loader Beatles original white album, mono. I've always wanted a mono, have a stereo. I have mono UK pressings, and but I never had a top loader mono. And it's in actually pretty decent shape. Yes, it's numbered, a little bit of a yellowing on it. I cleaned it up and it actually plays pretty nicely. You know the album. I don't have to go over it, but what a great album. Obviously the mono is a different mix. I still prefer the stereo, but that is probably the most interesting record I bought. My best purchase of 2024. Next, 50 years later, the best album from 1974. I've showed this album many times. In my book, this is a important album, a posthumous album that came out a couple months after the artist passed, and that would be Graham Parsons' Grievous Angel, a great fusion of country rock. Of course, Graham Parsons from the folk scene a little bit, pretty little rich boy from Georgia, lived on a trust fund, but made some important music with the Flying Burrito Brothers, the Byrds, of course, Sweetheart of the Rodeo. Made 2 solo records. After that, he did some solo folk records that have been released over the years. Of course, his band, the International Submarine Band, is considered a classic as well. Didn't sell in the day, but it's been reissued several times. But this album, with a great duet album with Emmylou Harris, to me is an important album. For me, the best album of 1974. Now this is a great one, an album that defines a genre. I decided to expand on this and really talk about a artist that defines a genre. And to me, an artist that I got into in the late 60s because of one of the Beatles, and that artist would be Ravi Shankar, a classical sitar player. He didn't do the crossover stuff in terms of pop and do Buddha beats later on, or Indian beats, mixing sitar and Western music. But he influenced, especially originally, George Harrison and so many other artists, Brian Jones of the Rolling Stones, so many artists. You couldn't get away from hearing songs with sitar or sitar-like sounds in 1967 and beyond. And his music really touches me, and I love it. And here's just a sampling of his records. Obviously, in America, he was on World Pacific, an offshoot of, I think, of Capitol Records, or was it United Artists. But anytime I see a Ravi Shankar album, I always pull it up. This is maybe a small selection of the 20 or 25 Ravi Shankar albums I have. Just what an incredible musician, an incredible person. And of course, I had to show this one, Ravi Shankar, in San Francisco. He got really kind of pulled into the psychedelia stuff. And he also always hated when Indian music, sitar music especially, was used in movies when there's drug scenes going on. It's like it kind of symbolizes, you know, you hear a sitar, you smoke a joint, or you trip out balls, man. Tripping balls to a sitar. But that is, to me, I don't know, but genre defines a genre. I would say Ravi Shankar definitely defines Indian, classical Indian music. Best band from your home country. I'm in the fortunate position to say my city, my home city, because, I mean, if I just said North America, United States of America, I mean, you can go crazy. So I always focus. Not everyone has that opportunity. It has a lot of bands, a lot of great bands out of their hometown. Some people do, some people don't. But I'm going to really pinpoint it. And I think the best band, especially in San Francisco in the 1960s, the Jefferson Airplane. This is the second of two records they put out in 1967. After that commercial success of Surrealistic Pillow, end of the year they pulled this wild, avant-garde, weird-ass, psychedelic, some would say a mess, but it's a brilliant album, and it's an important album. And Jefferson Airplane, that's my answer for that. An artist you miss dearly. Now, of course, it's obvious for me, and that is John Lennon. This is a comp that came out on Geffen Records. These photographs, it's even more emotional, I guess. These photographs were taken by Annie Leibovitz the afternoon of the day he passed, the day he died. And of course, that cover photograph at the same time of him without his clothes hugging on to Yoko Ono, which was posthumously put on the cover of Rolling Stone, was also taken during this session at the Dakota. But John Lennon is obviously an artist that I miss dearly, and I think a lot of people miss dearly. The best live album in your collection? Allman Brothers, Grateful Dead? No, it's the Little Feat. This is it. This is the one. Not only the best musically, the best sounding one. Just the recording on this, the drums, the keyboard, the vocals, that great slide guitar of Lowell George, pianos of Bill Payne. This is a wonderful record. Waiting for Columbus, Little Feat. The best live album in my collection. Now, this is an album I show a lot as well. Your partner just dumped you. What album are you putting on? I think every other video I show this record. And to me, the most moody, dirgy, sensual, sexy, dark, spiritual album that I would put on, and I put it on when I feel good, even not being dumped, but is Boatman's Call by Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds. Green Hair, Into My Arms, People Ain't No Good, There Is a Kingdom, Idiot Prayer, Green Eyes, which I have. Hard to see here, but this is that album. Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds, Boatman's Call. The best sounding drums on an album. Now, there are so many, obviously. A lot of jazz albums, a lot of great rock albums that recorded with the drums. I even thought of putting Enoch Light's Ping Pong, bachelor pad, left panning stereo bongos, those bongos albums from the late 50s, Bachelor records to test their stereos. But I thought a record that every time I hear it and the drums hit, especially on one song, but I'm going to do Elton John's Captain Fantastic and the Brown Dirt Cowboy, and the song is Someone Saved My Life Tonight. Emotional song and a beautiful song, and wonderfully recorded by the producer Gus Dudgeon. But when Nigel Olsson comes in about, seemed maybe 3 minutes, but 2 minutes into the song, those really loud drums. Now, someone's going to probably say, well, wait a second. What about, what's that song, that Phil Collins song in the 80s? This is what, 1976, I think, give or take. This album came out. But the drums come on there. It's so powerful, so emotional. Someone Saved My Life Tonight. Elton John and Bernie Taupin on this. What a wonderful record. But the drums on that are magnificent and it's powerful as hell. So I think that's the song that came to me when I read this question. That was my immediate thing after thinking of, oh, jazz drummers, just great drummers. It's not about the great drumming. It's about the sound of the drumming in that one, in my opinion. Favorite artist who is a member of two or more bands. And that was an obvious one. It came right to me. Obviously, it's Neil Young. I don't care what he says on his first solo album. I love this friggin' album. Baroque pop, not like the Crazy Horse stuff later on. It's more like a Buffalo Springfield album. But of course, other band he was in was Buffalo Springfield with Steve Stills and Dewey Martin, and Richie Furay and Bruce Palmer. What a great band. Ahead of their time, even though they had hits like Bluebird and For What It's Worth. But I think they burned brightly for way too short a time. Neil always gets impatient with things, doesn't he? And of course, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young brought on really because they needed a tour, and Steve Stills can't always play everything like he does on the records. But this is a wonderful record, great recorded record. Of course, they add on other musicians as well, Dallas Taylor and Greg Reeves on here. But this is my favorite of the two original proper Crosby, Stills and Nash and Young albums, even though the first one didn't have Neil Young. Beatles or Stones? Well, come on. And I think the best way to illustrate it is in 1967, probably the most important album ever to come out in popular music. It made pop music an art form, and it created rock and roll journalism and rock and roll criticism. And of course, that's Sgt. Pepper Lonely Hearts Club Band, Time Magazine. Normal music critics, non-pop music critics, they weren't even around really prior to this, and this kind of set the stage. And of course, 6 months later, the Rolling Stones copy them. Not as good. I like this record, though. Some people say the Stones don't do psychedelia, but I like this. The same photographer took the cover. Now, it's a different thing. They notched it up. The Stones are secretly hidden here a little bit. Not even secretly, their name here. Was it Welcome You, Rolling Stones, something or other. And the Beatles are hidden here on the, it's hard to see it on the 3D. You can see two of them on the 2D versions that came out later. You can see all four a lot easier. I do like this record, but Michael Cooper photographed it, but it wasn't Peter Blake who did the cover of this, didn't do the cover of this. But come on, guys. Copy the Beatles again? All right. You found a bag of weed. What are you going to listen to? Well, I don't have to find a bag of weed. You just go to the weed store these days. It was different way back then. And I would say, going back, say, into the late 60s, I wasn't smoking weed until the 70s. And I'm not a big pot smoker, never have been. But it would be Wonderwall. This is the wonderful George Harrison soundtrack. I think one of his top 5 greatest albums. Came out in 1968. Before the White Album. And this is a wonderful soundtrack and a wonderful genre mix of Indian music and Western music. Eric Clapton plays some great lead guitar on it. George Harrison produces it, all these Indian musicians in the studio in London. And what a wonderful soundtrack. Quirky, out there, really beautiful. Again, a mix of Western and Eastern music. And that would be my pothead record for this occasion here. An album from the 1980s you still listen to. Well, I don't think you had to put still listen to, Edwin. We listened to a lot of music of the 80s. REM, Talking Heads. But I just picked the Smiths because they're probably a very close, just barely makes my number one favorite band of the 80s. They have a finite, 5 albums, whatever it was. And I think they burn brightly, and they're a wonderful band. REM is a great band. I mean, so many. I like a lot of 80s music, but I really got tired of that tinkling piano and that those gated drums or whatever that was going on there. I hate that sound. And whenever I go back to like Wang Chung and that shit, I can't take it anymore. But the guitar-based bands there were excellent. A lot of great stuff in 1980s. A lot of shit stuff too. Now, this was an interesting question. I almost skipped it because the question is an artist whose political stance has soured on you. I support artists who make a stance and Phil Oakes, Billy Bragg, John Lennon, the Rolling Stones, Creedence Clearwater. I like it. Of course, maybe it's my liberal ways. And I would say the artist, this is the Amboy Dukes. And you know who was in the Amboy Dukes, don't you? Ted Nugent. I can't stand Ted. I didn't like Ted Nugent before he was a wanker, political fuckhead, right-wing, shoot everything up and kill a rabbit in the White House type of fuckhead. But I love this album. I like the psychedelic one. Thing is, I'm not a heavy rock and roll guy anyway, so politics or not, there's some people who don't have different politics than me that I'm fine. So politics don't really get in the way for me, despite what someone's going to put in the comments here. I just don't like Ted Nugent. I think he's a fucking whack job, a fucking idiot asshole. And so I don't like his music. But I didn't like his music before that either, except the Amboy Dukes. And the song on here, of course, Journey to the Center of Mind, is a fantastic psychedelic kind of garage song from the 1960s. Wonderful, wonderful. I think this was maybe a record store day thing last year, maybe. But I love it. I love it. So now don't get all wonky on me. You can put your comments and just chill out a little bit. The next one is show your favorite record label. Now I'm showing a different version of the White Album. And of course, to me, the most beautiful label, classic, to me is the Apple label. I love this. Of course, there was variations on it. Red for Let It Be, orange for All Things Must Pass. The B-side frequently would have the half. They used the Granny Smith label as their template, as their hero for the design of this. I just think the Apple label is a beautiful, beautiful label. So it's my favorite record label. A run of 3 great singles. Now, I pulled some singles, and they're not all in order. And I know I skipped some things. I couldn't find all the proper ones, but let me show you, because I think this is one of the great singles band, and they make great albums. But one of the great songwriters. In fact, if you watch my greatest songwriters in the UK, my number 2 is Ray Davies. And yes, he pronounced it Ray Davis. His brother Dave pronounced it Ray Davies. Go figure. The Kinks, Set Me Free Little Girl. Again, I'm skipping some, so just look at these great singles. The Kinks, Tired of Waiting, so tired, tired of waiting. Who'll Be the Next in Line? A great friggin' single. Dead End Street, another one. What a great run of singles. These are original Pie, mostly. The greatest single of the 1960s, possibly, Waterloo Sunset on Pie Records. And later, and I skipped a few, obviously I don't have Victoria here, but in 1970 is L-O-L-A, Lola, where they sing Coca-Cola, and they had to change it for the BBC. Say Cherry Cola. No commercialism on the BBC there. All right. The next prompt is a record store day purchase that you actually constantly listen to. There are actually a lot. And the one that came to mind immediately, it was a tape from Blood on the Tracks. And it was put out like a test pressing. This is the original Blood on the Tracks, if you know the whole story. Dylan recorded the whole record. And I always get this backwards, Minneapolis and New York. He recorded it all. They started pressing the covers, and the liner notes said one thing, and then Dylan decided to recut half the tracks or so, and he cuts half the tracks featuring unique mixes, and this is the original New York version, so this is the first version, New York. Then he recut half the tracks, or some of the tracks in Minneapolis or Minnesota. Well, that is Minneapolis. And that's what came out, and this was done as a test pressing. A number of test pressings did get out, and this is sort of a recreation of that at the time. And I remember there was a producer who I knew. His name is Elliot Mazer. He produced Harvest, that worked with Neil Young several times. And I was at his house. He had a studio in San Francisco called his Master's Wheel. And I was at his house one day, and he played me that tape for the first time. This would have been 1978 or so, and I'd never heard it up to that point. I don't think it had been bootlegged yet. But he had a copy of it, and he played it for me, and it was wow, because I knew that album. I love Blood in the Tracks. Next question is, you can be reincarnated as any artist, dead or alive. Who's it going to be? Well, obvious choice too. I thought about Lennon because I just like Lennon, but he didn't last long, did he? And I would pick Paul McCartney. But I'd go back in time and collaborate more and edit my work more after the Beatles. I think Paul McCartney, I mean, to me, obviously, an amazing musician, one of the best songwriters ever, pop songwriters. He puts out a lot of music. He has put out a lot of music, and sometimes his records don't get edited well. Every record I have, every record, there's 3 to 4 great tracks and a lot of crap. He needs to edit it well. Is it hard to say no to Paul in the studio or in the wherever if you're collaborating? I wish that collaboration with Elvis Costello had been more fruitful and they actually recorded together, because some great songs came out of that, like Veronica and My Brave Face, I believe. I think I would have changed that. Now, of course, in hindsight, it's easy to say, and if you're reincarnated, am I reincarnated as a Paul McCartney, as a baby Paul McCartney? When am I reincarnated? When do you become the person? It's such a weird question when they say, like, it's kind of like if you could go back in time and kill baby Hitler. Well, would I be baby McCartney? Then have to do it all over again. I'd meet John and play in the Beatles, and I'd probably make the same mistakes, because if I was him, you'd make the same mistakes, right? But if I knew what I know now and know about his records he put out over the years, there's a few things I would do. I wouldn't pack the pot in my suitcase, or in Japan, or I'd blame Linda. That's hers. That's not my case. I'm kidding about that. There's certain things I would definitely do differently. I mean, you could, that's a whole thing about time machines and time travel, and can you change things if you know about it? You can't change one thing because everything else gets screwed up. I'm kind of going on, but Red Rose Speedway. All right, I just use that because I like that picture with the rose in his mouth that Lennon McCartney took. The next question is the best 3 lines of a song. I don't think the lyrics are here, so I'll try to go from memory. Across the universe, words are flowing out like endless rain into a paper cup. They slither widely as they slip away across the universe. Pools of sorrow, tears of joy, open through my open mind. Thoughts caressing me. Jai Guru Deva Om. Nothing's going to change our world. I'm not getting this totally right, but you know the song and you know the lyrics. Thoughts meander. That lyric, it's the best John Lennon lyric. Best thing he's ever written. And he's written a lot of great lyrics. So you get my drift on this. This is a UK original copy of Let It Be, outside of the box. So there we go. The last actual question, number 19, is an album you never tire of. A lot of the albums, but for this, I decided to go with the second album, self-titled album by the band. This was in 1969. This came out. I love this record. This is their best record. Music from Big Pink is important because it was so different at the time. Music from Big Pink is a genre-bending record, an American record, even though 5 out of the 6 guys are Canadians. Robbie Robertson's songwriting really shows America, a certain side of America, Americana, of the history of American, everything from the Civil War on, Across the Great Divide, Rag Mama Rag, The Night They Drove Old Dixie Down, Up on Cripple Creek, Whispering Pines. This plays like a greatest hits, if you can call it, best of, really. Not really hits, but Jemima Surrender, Unfaithful Servant, King Harvest, Has Surely Come. I mean, a perfect record, perfect sounding record. Also, I believe this was also produced by John Simon, I think, who produced the first album and produced what Big Brother and the Holding Company's Cheap Thrills. I mean, the cover alone looks like something out of the Civil War. This black and white picture, the way they're dressed, the way they appear. I never tire of this album because it's not a dated album. It doesn't have those tinkling 80s things or the 60s grungy, garage band thing or the slickness of a 90s or 2000 pop record. It's something very organic, great musicians, a little funky also, very soulful in a way, not a country record. It's really a mix of, soul and gospel and rock and roll and just a perfect record. Self-titled band, came originally in America on Capitol Records. And share your favorite VC channel. I don't like to play favorites. And there's a handful of channels. This is going to sound like a cop-out. There's a handful of channels I like. And I think more than the channels, what I will say is the friendships. And this is going to get kind of a kumbaya-esque ending here. The friendships I've made over the last 6-7 years now that I've been since I've been doing this, and the people I've met in person. Now, there are people I met virtually that I still want to meet, so I'm going to put them aside, and no offense to you because I haven't met you yet. But the people I've met